Welcome to my channel Anyway. Today we will going to discuss about the cerebral anatomy and the functions of the cerebrum. Now this is showing the gross feature of the cerebrum. It is the inferior view of cerebrum having the two large cerebral hemispheres that are connected by a way of corpus callosum. There is a major commissure between the two cerebral hemispheres. And what you can see in the inferior view of the cerebral hemisphere that the two hemisphere of the cerebrum are connected by a way of a large longitudinal fissure. This fissure ultimately separates the right and the left part of the cerebral hemisphere. Then in the middle you can see this is a diencephalon, that is the other part of the forebrain. This diencephalon forms the thalamus, the hypothalamus and the pituitary glands, while this is showing the brain stem having the midbrain, geniculate bodies, and then the red nucleus. Ultimately, because inferiorly to the cerebrum these structures are present. These structures are developed from the diencephalon of the forebrain, while that of the cerebral hemispheres that are the largest part of our brain and cover most of the structure of our brain are developed from the telencephalon of the forebrain. Now we're going to see what is the structures that we can see if we see the cerebrum on the lateral view. Now guys, here you can see this is showing the lateral view of the cerebral hemispheres, and here first thing we should see this are the certain convolutions or the certain gyri like areas. These are called as the sulcus. That is a line connecting these areas. This is the sulcus, and between the two sulcus there is a presence of a elevated area. These areas are called as the gyri. That can be very small gyri or that can be a large gyri. So the sum of the important sulcus are, the main sulcus include the central sulcus. This is the central sulcus that is dividing the two lobes, that is the motor area and the sensory area, or you can say the frontal lobe with the parietal lobe. Then there's a formation of a lateral sulcus. This sulcus is a lateral sulcus. There's also a large sulcus of the cerebral hemisphere, and this divide the upper part with the lower part. That is the temporal lobe with the parietal lobe and the frontal lobe. Because anterior to the central sulcus is the frontal lobe and posterior to the central sulcus is the parietal lobe, while inferior to the lateral sulcus is the temporal lobe. So this lateral sulcus is going to divide these two areas with the temporal lobe. One more sulcus is very important here is the parieto-occipital sulcus. This sulcus here you can see is the parieto-occipital sulcus, and this sulcus is going to divide all of the lobes with another lobe, that is the occipital lobe. The occipital pole or the occipital lobe is an area that is important for the vision. So these are the main four lobes of the cerebral hemispheres and how they are divided. So here you can see in the color diagram it is shown that this is a frontal lobe, this is the parietal lobe, posterior to the central sulcus. Posterior to the parieto-occipital sulcus is the occipital lobe, and inferior to the lateral sulcus is the temporal lobe. So it's very simple to remember all these main sulci and the main lobes of the cerebral hemisphere. Coming to some of the important areas where we can study how the areas are divided and what are the particular function of that area. So this central sulcus is going to divide into the anterior area called as the premotor area, and posterior to the central sulcus is called as the somatosensory area, where the sensations can carry, and here is the motor function. Then this frontal lobe is again divided into three by the presence of a two sulci. It divided into three lobes, that is superior frontal sulcus, inferior frontal sulcus and the middle frontal sulcus. Going to divide these gyri into the superior middle gyri, inferior middle and the middle and the superior middle gyri. Now coming to the temporal and occipital, similarly in the frontal there is a division in the temporal and the occipital region, and in the parietal region into superior temporal, superior parietal, inferior parietal, lateral occipital gyri, inferior occipital gyri. So these gyri are certain areas which are important anatomically, but now we're going to discuss it by the functional, how the functional areas are present, and we have to remember only the name of that gyri or the sulci where any functional area is present. Now here you can see I have drawn a diagram that is going to explain you very easily that what are the function areas and what are the main areas and the gyri that you should have to remember. So first we have to know what are the sulcus. the main sulcus, that is the central sulcus, is present here, and it is going to divide the main lobe, that is the frontal lobe, anteriorly and the parietal lobe posteriorly, while that of the lateral sulcus is going to divide this frontal and the parietal lobe with the temporal lobe inferiorly. And the parieto-occipital sulcus, this is the parieto-occipital sulcus, is going to divide all the lobes with the occipital lobe that is present posteriorly. Here you can see this is the occipital lobe present posteriorly. And this is showing the cerebellum, that is inferior to the cerebrum, and this is the brainstem. Now, after discussing the main sulci and the main gyroids and the lobes of the cerebrum, we are going to discuss the important areas, the important functional areas that are present in certain areas or the lobes of the cerebrum. Now, what areas we can see in the frontal lobe? First, we have to know that this central sulcus is going to divide two areas. The anterior, called as the voluntary motor areas, where the voluntary motor activities of the body are controlled of the opposite side, and there is a functioning and the planning of the movement that should be taken place in the limbs or all over the body. In the somatosensory area, posterior to the central sulcus is present in the somatosensory area, that is a part of parietal lobe, while that of the motor area is a part of frontal lobe. So this somatosensory area is very much important for the somatic sensation that are coming from the body by the spinothalamic pathway and are going from the corticospinal pathway. These sensations include the proprioception, the pain, the temperature, the vibration, and all type of certain sensations related with the body. These sensations are carried by this somatosensory area of the parietal lobe, and it will going to cause the sensation of the opposite side of body. So these are the two main very important areas that you should have to remember in any case. Then after these two areas, what other areas we can see in the frontal lobe includes the anterior area, that is the area of a thought. Here all the thoughts of a body, and here all the thoughts of the brain generates. Mostly this area is called as the prefrontal area because it is in the frontal area and it is the most anterior area of the frontal lobe. This prefrontal area is located, and this is very much responsible for the thoughts. Then posterior to prefrontal area is the area between the voluntary motor, and the prefrontal area is the area for the mostly responsible for the eye movements and mostly responsible for the visual movements. So these three areas are very important. And now coming to another area that is present in the frontal lobe inferiorly to the voluntary motor area. This small area is called as the Broca area of speech. This Broca's area of speech is important in the speech production by movement of the laryngeal muscles, by movement of the respiratory muscles, and controlling the speech. Now in the parietal lobe, what other area we can see is the area posterior to the somatosensory area called as the hand skill area. Here the skill movements of the hand and the upper limbs are controlled. Then in the occipital area, that is mostly responsible for the vision. This is the only function of the occipital area to control the primary vision and the secondary visual activities. The last area that is remain is the temporal lobe. In the temporal lobe, we can see three areas. Upper superior temporal gyrus and the inferior temporal gyrus are divided by the presence of this sulci. This sulci is called as the temporal sulci. There is a middle temporal sulci going to divide these two gyri. In the upper part of the temporal lobe, there is the presence of a hearing or the auditory area that can be primary auditory area or the secondary auditory area responsible for the auditory reflexes. Inferior to the middle temporal sulci, there is an area called as the memory area, and it is mostly related with the hippocampus and the limbic system that will going to convert the memory short term into the long term memory, and it will going to convert the experiences into the new memory. So this area is very much responsible for the memory production. Another area that is present in the temporal lobe is also related with the speech is the Wernicke area. This Wernicke area is somewhat related to the Broca area by the arcuate fibers, and this Wernicke area is responsible for the language compression, while that the Broca area was for the speech production because it related with the voluntary activity, but this Wernicke area is related with the sensory activity, and it is important for the language production and understanding of the speech that is produced from the Broca area. So these two areas are very much related, and there is very important working of the Wernicke area called as the intelligence area. So this area is very much important. It is formed from three parts of the cerebral hemisphere, including the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe. These three areas combine to form this Wernicke area, while that of in the frontal lobe, this is the presence of a Broca area. This thing you should have to remember. So if we summarize the role of all the lobes into 4 points, they will include the frontal area responsible for the motor activity, the parietal is responsible for the sensory activity, the temporal is much responsible for the auditory activity, and the occipital is responsible for the visual activity. These are the 4 main important functions of the temporal lobes and the other lobes of the cerebral hemisphere. I hope you will be explained well. Don't forget to subscribe for more. Thank you for watching.